India's corporate governance standards may have moved up a few notches. The much-awaited Uday Kotak Panel report is finally out. And although there are no game-changing ideas, the committee has managed to strike a balance between the interest of promoters and the concerns of small investors. To start with, the panel proposes stricter norms for independent directors, especially in the light of their behavior on the boards of Tata Group companies and also Infosys. The report says at least 50%, that's half of the directors on the board of listed companies, should be independent, and the nomination should come from the board and not the promoters. But the bigger change is in the way companies share critical information with insiders. In a pragmatic approach, the panel says individuals seeking inside information should sign an agreement with the company. Such packs should be treated as a material event and must be reported to the exchanges.
The other critical area is related party transactions, and the panel says companies should build in enough caveats to ensure utmost transparency. The panel talks in detail about minimum qualifications for independent directors, and even their resignations should be reported to the exchanges along with specific reasons. Some of the panel members and company law experts told ET Now the suggestions are pragmatic and ensure a smooth transition. Now time for the big questions. Will the Kotak Panel report lead to shareholder protection? Are these proposals based attainable for corporates? And more importantly, will these norms ensure better participation from various stakeholders like promoters, independent directors, the regulators, exchanges and the government? That's what we're debating on the India Development Debate. We're calling it the Swachh Corporate Abhiyan. And joining us on the show this evening is a stellar panel of experts. We've got Arun Nanda, Chairman of Mahindra Lifespace, Arun Kumar, Chairman and CEO KPMG, N. Venkatram, Managing Partner and CEO Deloitte India, Harish Salve, Senior Counsel Supreme Court and former Solicitor General of India, and Jane Gupta, Founder and MD of Stakeholder Empowerment Services. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us right here on ET Now. Mr. Nanda, I'm going to start off with you. What's your sort of assessment of the report as you glance through the key findings? Do you think this helps India make a take a giant leap as far as corporate governance standards are concerned? Because truth be told, some of our corporate governance standards are pretty poor, and at a time when most countries are trying to put in place institutional frameworks to improve corporate governance, is this a solid institutional framework being put in place to improve corporate governance in India?
To be honest, I think what Mr. Kotak committee has done well is that they have not been radical, but they have been proactive. They brought in changes. Some of the things that they have brought in is game changing, but it will not be difficult to implement. Personally, I feel that the European system of having distinguishing the chairman from the chief executive is a much better model than the American model, where the chief executive and the chairman is the same. And that's one of their major recommendations. I think they put more onus on the independent directors, especially audit committee. They're saying that audit committees should meet at least 5 times a year. They've made things like risk management review of loans over 100 crores. I think they've taken a practical approach to the problem rather than a radical theoretical approach. I think the committee has done a fantastic job in balancing what is achievable in the short run with what is required.
Okay, Mr. Nanda's word is that they have been pragmatic, they've been practical, they've chosen that approach over being theoretical and radical approaches that perhaps never see light of day. But Mr. Arun Kumar, I'm going to get you to A, pick up on that thread, and B, also respond to the fact that will these recommendations in totality perhaps take up India's corporate governance norms a notch higher, given, countries try and put in place institutional framework on corporate governance? Does this perhaps improve our tally on that front? Mr. Arun Kumar.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with the comments that were just made, that this is a report that is very practical. The report itself says that it is evolutionary, it is not revolutionary. And the beauty of this report is that in the various details of the report, it advances the cause of good corporate governance in every area, particularly in the area of the composition and role of directors, the focus on committees, the disclosures regarding directors in terms of the skill sets of directors. In a number of different ways, I think the committee, under the able leadership of Uday Kotak, has done a nice job of moving the ball forward on corporate governance.
Okay, Mr. Venkatram, let me bring you in here and let's now talk about some of the specifics in the report. And I think one of the focal points clearly has been the role of independent directors. Independent directors have come under attack, post the two controversial boardroom spats, one in the Tata Group and of course the other one in Infosys. Do the set of recommendations you believe, do they give more teeth to independent directors in this country?
Thank you. I think that on an overall basis, if I were to look at it, the committee has looked at events of the past and at the same time is looking at what would happen in the future. And one of the overarching things that comes out is the fact that we've looked at group governance in far more detail. And therefore, I would say when you look at independent directors, you should also look at the fact that we were also looking in terms of how independent directors would work in that new world. And on an overall basis, you've also got to strengthen the hand of the independent director through the committees in which he serves. There's also a concept of a lead independent director and also the other people he looks to for comfort, such as, for example, the independent auditor, to see how you can strengthen the hand of the auditor. And I would perhaps say when you look at the minority and other stakeholders, there's a lot of disclosure that is also being done, which is going to be very beneficial.
Okay, disclosure, that's going to be beneficial, and I think that's the whole idea of getting independent directors to have teeth, bring more competency on the board. But Mr. Salve, one of the focal points, like Sandeep pointed out there, is independent directors. Their role has come under attack, of course, after the boardroom sagas that we saw both at Infosys and the very high-level spat at the Tata Group. What's your view? Do you believe they have more power? Do you believe they get more teeth with these recommendations? Because, the role of independent directors is a big focal point of these.
See, it does tend to increase the strength of independent directors on the board. What we need is some degree of accountability of independent directors, not the long haul through the Companies Act route. But these boardroom spats do show that there is need for a greater awareness that if you are an independent director, you're virtually a public trustee in a company. And that kind of an approach has to be brought to bear. So again, I said, if there is a code of conduct of independent directors, which is also to be written up, it will definitely be helpful. I mean, some independent directors shooting off letters, independent directors making public statements. And we saw that in the Tata spat, where even before the ink had dried on the paper written to make the change, independent directors had started firing off straight from the hip. This sort of a thing has to be carefully calibrated. There's an institutional responsibility, and everybody has to take responsibility for what they say. So that kind of a system has to be brought in. I'm assuming something or the other will be found in the detail where it will strengthen the institution of independent directors also. Mere numerical strength is not enough. We need to make it more robust also.
Okay, let's address some of the detail as well that Mr. Salve alluded to. And Mr. Gupta, let me come to you now. The recommendations have put the spotlight on the competency of independent directors, which is, I think, an important thing to mention here, because they've now put the onus on the board to list out the competencies of independent directors. What does the board believe are the competencies that an independent director should possess, and what are the competencies that independent directors currently possess? So both need to be listed out by the board. Does the fact that they put this onus on the board, in a sense, is that going to sort of elevate the standard of independent directors in corporate boards? Do you see boards being more conscious of who they pick as independent directors?
See, I would say that if I have to pick one theme from the report, what Venkat has said, evolutionary, not revolutionary, but I will pick one more theme, that the entire committee's approach was that how to make governance more in the spirit rather than the letter. And you find that everywhere, every company was complied with in all the norms of corporate governance, whether it by MCA or by LODR or SEBI, but in spirit we were lacking. So this report intends to put it in the spirit, and this is one example, because if you see everywhere, no company ever said that we have this gap in competency versus actual. And here now the companies will be forced to spell out what is the required and what you have. So, when you appoint a director, they will have to put in the resolution that this is the gap in our present director or present board. This gap is being filled by this person because this person brings to the table this experience. And in past we have seen boards, we have seen audit committees, we have seen committees where the person who is in the audit committee, in my opinion, would not know details of accounting. So, the issue is that this is one step for bringing compliance in the spirit rather than letter alone. And what Mr. Salve says, the discipline and something, now the issue is very clear that we have found independent director to get a voice only when there is something in the public domain, and that too in the extremes, and that we have seen in the case of Tata as well as Infosys both. But the trouble does not start like this, trouble is brewing, and I find that most of the independent directors have been silent when things were happening.
Right.
And then what they found, that when they were finding the income uncomfortable, they would resign for the personal reason. So now the personal reason is no more acceptable, you got to give a detailed reason.
Okay.
So that is where we are feeling that the spirit of the governance is more important than the letter.
I get your point, I'll come back to you. I get, and that's exactly the point that I wanted to take forward. Mr. Nanda, do you agree that at least these recommendations, which you began by calling pragmatic, you know, make the law more in spirit and not just in letter? Everybody was abiding by rules and everybody was following the letter to the T. It's the spirit that was perhaps being violated because, you know, there were so many loopholes that were there, and there was so much that the promoter class could do. So I'm asking you, does this really take the spirit into cognizance as much as the letter was being taken?
I would tend to say it yes, but let me also tell you, you know, it also depends on companies to companies. You know, a few minutes ago my colleagues talked about qualification. Now, qualification on paper and qualification on paper will meet the requirements of the law and public perception, but really getting people, I think the best thing that's going to happen is that if we can make sure to move forward that the chairman is an independent person and not a promoter, and at least to start with we've divided the chairman's role and the role of the CEO, these things will happen. But there is one good thing that has happened out of the two cases that you have cited more than once. I think the desire for good governance, corporate governance, is coming into family controlled companies also. And when I talk of family controlled companies, I am excluding the Mahindras and the Tatas and the large groups which have always followed good governance practices. I am talking of mid-size listed companies. They are now saying that if they have to go to public to raise money, if they want a good price, the institutional investors, the public, is paying a premium for good governance. And having sat on boards for last 30 years, I can definitely say that there is a significant improvement in how board meetings are conducted, openness, transparency, accountability. These new committees, now they have said that even stakeholder committee chairman will have to be made available to meet the shareholders once a year. The powers of NRC have been, the nomination remuneration committee have been increased. And I think these are going to go a long way. And that is where I started by saying that yes, it is the spirit.
Okay, Mr. Venkatram, since you were a part of the committee as well, it's important to get this clarification. We were earlier, and Mr. Nanda alluded to it as well, we were earlier talking about, you know, competence. Do these recommendations hold true for PSU boards as well? The fact that appointment of directors on PSU boards also should be on the basis of competence, and that the board needs to declare the competence of any independent director has been picked up. This, especially in light of recent controversy where we've seen party spokespersons being appointed to marquee boards of companies like, you know, like L&T and ONGC. So does this hold true for state-owned companies as well?
Before I get on to that, if I may just, keeping with the theme of the current conversation, also say that the report was looking at being pragmatic And while we were quoting certain instances that did happen, I think you must also look at the backdrop of two other events. One is the loan defaults, and the other was shell companies. And I think, in these recommendations, you will also find that some of these issues would also get addressed. When we looked in terms of transparency, for example, we said that in spirit, if you have to look at promoter groups, if a promoter group owns more than 20% of the company, then why should a transaction not be shown as a related party transaction? In addition, we went one step further to say that if the promoter holding in the company is more than 10%, then in addition to what would have been shown for a promoter over 20%, even a 10% plus promoter would need to disclose transactions that he has with the company. So these were the sort of transparent disclosures that came in. There were some others that we thought of, like, say, related party transactions in the half year should be disclosed to the website of companies. We also looked in terms of cash flow statements and the fact that they should be disclosed. And then in this backdrop, if you look at the public sector, after all, public sector companies, the PSUs, are also listed. You equally have similar stakeholders. If you look at the market cap of these companies, it is pretty significant. And one could arguably say that the market cap of these companies would certainly improve significantly more if the demonstration of corporate governance is more clearly articulated. And therefore, in summary, I would say that public sector companies, the PSUs, should also be looking at corporate governance standards at par with other listed companies.
That really puts the spotlight on how many of those appointments should be recently questioned. But Mr. Arun Kumar, will come to you, and the point that we would want to ask you is that while board has been given the prerogative to appoint independent directors, can an Indian board and how we work and function really override the promoter class? Is that possible? Is that pragmatic really?
So can you just repeat that question, because I didn't quite get it. While the board...
No, I'm saying while the board has been given the prerogative to appoint these independent directors, and it can no longer be done, say, by the promoter class, is it possible that the board can actually override what the promoter wishes to do? Is that going to be possible in a country like ours? How companies are run here?
Well, that depends on the quality, the caliber of the independent directors that you have on the board. So first of all, this suggests having at least 50% independent directors. There are plenty of disclosures. For instance, an independent director decides to leave. The director has to disclose why he or she left. And if the disclosure is on account of some adverse development in the company, that has to be disclosed. That is the spirit of the disclosure. So I think there are a number of aspects here that look towards getting stronger independent directors, increasing the pool of independent directors. Compensation of independent directors has been addressed. So I think the whole trend of the report is to strengthen very much the function and role of the independent director.
Okay, let's refocus and talk about the other contentious issue in this whole corporate governance report, Mr. Salve, which is on information sharing with promoter-owned non-listed entities, unlisted entities. Now, has the report, you believe, been soft on that particular matter, as it allows companies to get into arrangements, pacts with designated persons on information sharing? Does this fundamentally address the problem of keeping arm's length distance with unlisted promoter entities? Because that's again an issue that came to spotlight in light of the entire controversy over the boardroom tussle at Tata Group, and how some of the issues that were discussed in the boards of listed companies were discussed, passed on to some of the unlisted promoter entities, and allegations of insider trading and whatnot. Does this report fundamentally address those concerns?
See, the global concern in India is over even today, a relative degree of opacity in the unlisted promoter companies and their relationship with listed entities. I don't know what details have been provided, but there has to be greater degree of transparency in related party transactions. And I hope that has been addressed, because information is vital that everything should be open to public gaze so that it can be brought before the shareholders and before the regulatory authorities if there's anything amiss. It's a very terse statement saying better information and information sharing, but again, as I said, the devil lies in the detail.
You know, Mr. Gupta, we've had many a discussion with you right here on ET Now at the height of the Tata boardroom battle and then, of course, at Infosys on info sharing with promoter-owned unlisted entities, and that's always been this grey shrouded area in secrecy. Do you believe the report has perhaps left a lot of room for discretion, has left some amount, or has it been a tad too soft, like Sandeep said, or in allowing companies to get in pacts with designated persons on information sharing? Does it really address the problem of keeping arm's length distance with unlisted promoter entities? Mr. Gupta, this question is for you.
Yeah, okay. See, I would first say that we cannot have a situation where we copy and paste what is happening in other jurisdiction. In India, the situation on the ground level is totally different than what is in UK or US, because in India most of the companies are promoter oriented and large amount of share capital is held by promoters. So you cannot expect that a person who holds 75% will come to know what is happening in his company which he owns through the newspaper or news channels. So that is the ground reality. Now, having said that this is the ground reality, the other ground reality is this, that everybody comes to know in the promoter what is happening in the boardroom, what is happening in the company. Now, even if SEBI was to come very tough or everything else, no information can be shared, but practically it will not be possible. So, when something cannot be implemented in toto, whatever is the ideal, but I do not think it is ideal also, because Indian situation is totally different, whether it is a government company, whether it is a private company, because ownership is majorly with one person or one family. So, we thought that what is happening in the grey area, in the shadow, should be happening in the transparent and institutionalized manner. And I have been advocating this earlier also, that there has to be an institutional mechanism where information can be shared with the promoter in a transparent manner with some sort of a checks and balances, so that the promoter cannot misuse that information. And this committee has precisely done that they have provided a green channel where promoter or significant shareholder can get information, but that information will come with certain conditions, and they will be more and more responsible for that, and they will not be able to trade or they will be charged under insider trading if they misuse that information. This is what we have brought, and that I hope will go forward in bringing more transparency as far as the promoter owned companies are there.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Arun Kumar, I want to come in on that. You know, Mr. Gupta speaks about the green channel. I'll tell you what the concern is in some sections of the industry is, does this fundamentally solve the problem that the committee was trying to solve, which is, you know, at the end of the day, how many undertakings are the boards going to seek? You know, will multiple officials serving the promoter also be made to sort of, you know, submit these called upon to submit these undertakings? More importantly, what if the promoter isn't an entity? What if the promoter is a trust? So there is a promoter's promoter in this case. So there are multiple layers. So, you know, how many levels will you cascade this to? And isn't that going to be a very complicated structure? Mr. Kumar?
Yes, so Mr. Gupta actually explained the balance that was struck. The report, the recommendations do define who can be named a designated person to get such information as a promoter. That is addressed in the report. And then the various protections on related party transaction disclosures, that would be another aspect of a counterbalance.
Okay, Mr. Arun Kumar there. I'm going to take this to Mr. Venkatraman, and Mr. Venkatraman, you know, just a follow-up quick question on this, on undertakings that will be sought, and will multiple officials serving the promoter and even the promoters group be called upon to submit these undertakings? How is this really going to work?
Yeah, if I can just preface before the answer, you know, we call this a green channel But the reality is that if you looked at the law that existed, the code that was there was the question of sharing of information for legitimate purposes. What this is now giving an opportunity to people to say that let me sign this undertaking so that from my perspective, there is absolute clarity that the information will be shared and whoever signs the declaration will follow the rules of law. I would not like to say this is only for promoter groups because as I was mentioning earlier, this also applies prospectively. And when you look in terms of the future of our country, we will have many multinationals coming into India as well. And therefore, it's not a problem unique to promoters. When you have listed multinationals, they would also have a need to share information with their foreign offices, for example. And therefore, they would also need to be sure that when they share that information, that there is the legitimacy of doing so. So I therefore think that in a sense this articulates the need for more clarity and more paperwork so that all parties concerned believe that they're not leaving it to some future decision that could possibly challenge what is a legitimate purpose and what is not.
Okay, Mr. Arun Nanda, I'm coming to you and I want to touch upon another aspect.
In a little long-winded way, but...
Yeah, fair enough. I get the point and that clarity was in sort of, is welcome. But Mr. Nanda, I want to touch upon another aspect. We've got little time and a lot of ground to cover, which is on royalty payouts, which I believe now have been brought under the scanner in this report because the panel recommends a shareholder vote, of course, of only public shareholders. So the promoter cannot vote in this particular case. In case of excessive royalty payout, and they've defined that as anything that exceeds 5% of turnover. Is this long overdue, given the way, a whole host of multinational corporations have been sort of, taking a lot of royalty fee out of the Indian subsidiaries? Will this bring more transparency, at least in some multinational corporations, the fact that now there is a structure to how you can charge a royalty fee? Mr. Arun Nanda.
I haven't read the details, so I won't be able to comment what it says. But let me tell you that it's a subject which can be debated both ways. One of the large groups brought royalty. There were a lot of controversies. In Mahindra's, for example, Mr. Mahindra was very clear that I'm not going to charge royalty. Now, royalty for a use of brand to a certain extent is fair, but transparency will help. There was issue, but a lot of these things got checked earlier on also on transfer pricing and some of those rules. So I think clarity will help, but royalty justification is a gray area. It's very difficult, and that's why in Mahindra Group we took a decision that we will not charge royalty. But I want to comment for 1 minute on the earlier subject because I want to bring a practical aspect to it, if you permit me. See, the sharing information, if it leads to insider trading, is totally wrong. It should not be, and that's why they brought that green channel. Related party transactions have to be to greater scrutiny. But in large groups, whether it is Tata's, whether it is multinational, whether it is Mahindra's, lot of specialized services rest with a corporate and it's a sharing. It could be in the area of IT, it could be in the area of tax, it could be in the area of marketing, brand strategy. Now, if you don't share the information, how do you get information? How do you get benefit out of it? So, sharing of an information is necessary, and I think this green channel will make it more clear what is shareable and how it can be shared. And I think it will make it easier for large groups to work. What one has to protect that it should not be used either for insider trading and related party transactions.
Right. I get your point, sir. I'm just running a little low on time as far as the show is concerned. Mr. Salve, very quickly as I wrap things here, is this a game-changing report as far as corporate governance standards in India are concerned? And where do you believe it kind of falls short of expectations?
Game changing is not an overnight exercise. Game changing is a process of transformation. Indian companies have also leapfrogged in transformation as compared to global standards, because we've had a much shorter period to transition. But having said that, yes, it is necessary to set things in order. This report is a step in the right direction. Only place where I felt it falls short, I think they suggested only one woman director. You know, that is not really, one should be a minimum, but there should be a recommendation of a greater number of women directors, because the idea is not to have a token presence, but the idea is to drive it in that direction a little more aggressively. But again, it may be that they have suggested you must have more women directors and not less than one or something like that. So we don't know how they played it out, but yes, definitely that's another area which could do with some strengthening.
Mr. Arun Kumar, you want to comment on the point of diversity? Obviously, everyone would welcome the move to have at least one independent director, because earlier it could be a promoted director, but one independent director. But could you take that question from Mr. Salve on why could the board not have gone a little further? And of course, your comments on what do you think? What is it that, is there any unfinished agenda, anything that the committee wanted to take up but couldn't take up for whatever reasons? Mr. Arun Kumar, very quickly though.
The question is, what are the issues that the committee was not able to take up? I'm sorry, I'm kind of begging.
I was asking you on...
I'd say the committee covered a wide range of issues.
Please complete your point, sir.
So the question is, what are the issues the committee did not take up? Is that the question?
Yeah, that's right. Please go ahead.
I didn't quite get the question because I'm not hearing you properly. But I can't think of any important issue that the committee did not take up within its frame of reference. We debated a number of issues. Frankly, I think we touched upon all the issues that we wanted to take up.
Mr. Venkatram, coming to you on the last word then, which is on the timeline that the committee has recommended for these norms to be implemented. Obviously, SEBI has now sought public opinion, but October 2018, is there a realistic time frame for corporate India to make the sort of magnitude of adjustments that we're talking about as far as the corporate governance structure is concerned?
Well, I think that there has been a fair amount of thought and flexibility that has gone into what we have recommended and the dates that have been recommended. And you will also find that a number of the changes that we have made is really in bringing some of the stuff into the tent which was on the outside. And frankly, therefore, some of those things can be done very, very quickly. An immediate example that comes to mind is, say, when you look at oversight over material subsidiaries, all that we did as a committee is to say that let's reduce the threshold for material subsidiary and say it's not 20% of turnover assets, but make it 10%. So I think that you'll find a large number of the recommendations would be easy to do. It's just that when you look on the outside, when you look in terms of independent directors, when you look in terms of women directors, when you look in terms of what the public sector undertakings will have to do to be at par with what the other companies are, yes, there are challenges, but I think all of us sitting around the table were committed to the fact that this is something that needs to get done as we build for the India of tomorrow.
Indeed. Thanks very much on that note, gentlemen, for being with us. Talking about diversity, I wish there were women on this panel as well. We do hope these recommendations will see the light of day and will bring in some gender diversity that is so very required in Indian industry. But thanks, gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts and your perspective on the India development debate.
It's a well-made beginning as far as cleaning up corporate India and corporate governance norms are concerned. Long way to go. Hopefully, SEBI will look at them in a more granular manner and accept some of these recommendations going forward. Thanks for being with us on this edition of India Development Debate. Up next is Top 10 at 10.